The topi, the turban, the izzat, the honor, asking people to uphold that. It was a very emotional speech, but it also made you vulnerable to, taunts from your political opponents. He was going begging for votes.
Well, I'm glad I went begging for votes, because unlike them, I don't think I'm some sort of Maharaja. I'm glad I begged for votes, and I would beg for votes again.
My mind goes back to 2002. That was perhaps the first big political knock. When you think back to that time and this time, which one feels tougher? Is the Congress bringing some value politically to the game?
I think it seems to be in their DNA. They work late. Unlike sort of us, I'm up at 6. The Congress only seems to start working at 10 o'clock at night.
Omar, being here in Kashmir, it feels like so much has changed and nothing has changed. And I'm just wondering, when you look at this election, you've had your share of ups and downs, as anybody in public life has. What does this campaign at this moment, coming as the first election in 10 years, the first after the abrogation of 370, what does it feel like?
In many ways, it feels really surreal, because I don't think any of us ever imagined, let's say, when the 2014 results were coming out, that the next election we would fight for the assembly would be 10 years later as a union territory, with Ladakh having been separated from us, and Jammu and Kashmir, its special status within the Indian Union, having been written down. I mean, I still remember that evening in 2014 when the results came out, and I sat down with you and we did an interview.
I remember that.
And I was rather chirpy. And you asked me why. And I said, look, this was actually a decent election to lose, because 6 years in office really takes it out of you. And I remember telling you that, look, when the next time elections come around, I'll be 55, 56. I've still got time on my side and all the rest of it. And no, actually, I wasn't going to be 55, 56. I was going to be just about 50 or thereabouts. And
I think you had 17 seats, if I remember this correctly. Was it 17?
Yeah. And I said that, look, we'll bounce back from here. Who knew that, 2014 would stretch to 2018, and then an extended period of central rule and all the changes that have been foisted on us. So, yes, so much has changed, but then so little at the same time.
How have these years changed you? You found suddenly, as you said, who would have imagined this moment? But you were also taken, like several other mainstream leaders, into detention, into custody. Your life changed. Your understanding of what freedom is changed. Are you a different Omar Abdullah from the one I met in 2014?
Definitely. I don't think there are any of us who have sort of lived through these last 8-10 years that have not been changed by it. Most of us sort of adversely. Speaking for myself, I'm obviously sort of a lot more jaded, a lot more bitter. I'm less likely to take people at face value.
Trust is broken.
Trust. Yeah. People who I had put in a lot of trust in, colleagues of mine, who suddenly decided to up and leave with no explanation whatsoever. So it becomes that much more difficult sort of to trust, to rebuild relationships and so on and so forth. Being locked up and put away for all those months. And with the justification in the PSA dossier that my detention is justified because I campaigned against Pakistan's boycott call and was able to encourage people to come out and vote. When your own country detains you for something like that, you have to ask yourself what the hell is going on.
Did you ever raise the detention in meetings with the central government, with the Prime Minister, with the Home Minister?
We've had one meeting with the Prime Minister, during which this was a topic of conversation.
What did he say?
That was the meeting in which he famously said, "Dil se duri or Dilli ki duri, dono ko dur karna hai." Of course, after that, nothing happened.
But when you brought this up, what did he say?
Nothing. He sort of, he doesn't, he's like other prime ministers. If there's something that they'd rather not acknowledge, then they don't say anything about it. So very little, if anything, was said about this.
Do you think people like you and me, I'm not in politics, but having been a kind of Kashmir obsessed person for years, do you think we were wrong about 370? And let me just explain my question. In not understanding how much widespread support there would be in the rest of India, including by parties or sections of people who don't vote BJP for the abrogation. Like, were you taken aback by that?
No, I think the BJP has run a very clever campaign in sort of highlighting one or two aspects of 370 to popularize its writing down.
उनका अपना झंडा, अपना संविधान,
उनका संविधान, आपको क्या मुल्क में दो प्रधानमंत्री चाहिए, and stuff like that. That said, I think the BJP overestimated the popularity of what they've done because it certainly didn't translate into votes. I mean, I find it mind-boggling that in a 5-year term during which a prime minister fulfilled two of the most contentious poll promises of the BJP, 370 and Ram Mandir, they actually went backwards in terms of public support. You would have imagined that 400 par would be something they would do in their sleep. But they didn't. They were reduced to a minority government.
So what does that tell you? That the political reward was not as enormous as they may have thought?
Look, even immediately after 370 was written down, when state elections took place, the BJP suffered. They weren't able to translate these massive sort of poll achievements or rather campaign achievements into numbers. So perhaps, I mean, for all the symbolism of 370, it didn't matter as much to people as bread and butter issues in the rest of the country.
Yeah. Now, before I come to the election, has anything improved in the Kashmir Valley? Some might ask you, despite being a critic of the government. Of course, the obvious pointers would be to the booked hotels, to the fact that you go to downtown today and you go to Khayyam Chowk and it's bustling with people at midnight. The fact that a cinema hall is going to open. The fact that that people today have moved from the politics of boycott to the politics of participation. The BJP would argue this is the change we brought. This is the Naya Kashmir.
I'm more than willing to grant them that sort of claim, provided they can show, or time will prove, that these changes are coming from within. That this is not out of some sort of fear or some sort of pressure. That the numerous arrests that have taken place, the large number of Kashmiri youngsters that are languishing in jails outside of J&K, the sort of weaponization of CID clearances for passports and government jobs and bank loans is not responsible for this. I mean, if all that is sort of put away and the situation remains the way it is today, this arbitrary dismissal from government service, the way in which people's homes are demolished and bulldozed in case there's a stone pelting incident, if you put all that aside and still things remain as calm as they are, then sure, I'll give credit to the BJP for this change in mindset. At the moment, the jury is out on that. Even the participation of, let's say, the Jamaat, on what basis are they participating? What is their agenda? What has got them to participate in these elections? There are no clear answers to this at the moment.
How do you explain the enthusiastic participation? When I was here for the Lok Sabha elections, I interviewed somebody who used to be a stone pelter in Baramulla. I interviewed the father of one boy who was a militant who was killed and another who's still in jail. Both of them were voting. This would not have been imaginable a decade ago. Even today, I've just been here for a few hours right now, but people are talking about participating. How do you understand that?
Well, I think obviously one of the key differences is that the parliament election and this election are taking place without any sort of boycott call.
Yeah.
Militant threat remains.
Yeah.
We've seen sort of an encounter in North Kashmir. You've seen the death of an army officer and a soldier in the Kishtwar region. So the threat of militancy remains, but what you don't have is an active boycott call by the separatist leaders. Now, I am unable to explain why. What has caused that change of heart?
The BJP would say it's crushed the separatists with its iron hand.
Sure, that would.
I'm imagining that would be the argument.
That would be the logical answer.
What do you think it is?
But then, crushing things doesn't mean the end to it. And that's why I come back to that point, that I would be more than happy to give the BJP credit for these things. when it is clear to us that this is happening from within, it's not an enforced calm. People's mindset has changed. The separatist leaders no longer believe in separatism. I mean, this faction of the Jamaat-e-Islami that's contesting elections is today willing to come forward and sign the same oath that we do.
But isn't that great?
I think it's a great thing. What I want to hear from them is what the last 35 years was about. Why was the National Conference relentlessly targeted for doing exactly what they're doing? Because they've achieved nothing. These 35 years has given nothing in terms of their agenda. So how do they justify the last 35 years? I mean, what has caused this change of heart? And is there going to be any acknowledgement of the suffering, the bloodshed that their 35-year campaign has caused?
Does this election feel like your toughest election in some ways because your heart is not fully in it? And I'm surmising that because previously you didn't show much enthusiasm for fighting an election for a union territory, right? You've said many times that people persuaded you to change your mind, and you changed your mind because you can't expect your party cadres to fight in an election that you're not reposing your faith in. But does it feel, for that reason, the toughest election? Because they'll say you're not there.
Actually, no. I mean, once I make up my mind, then
you put everything in.
Then everything goes into it. If I wasn't sort of committed to this election, I wouldn't be fighting it, and I certainly wouldn't be fighting it from 2 seats. So no, once something is decided, then that's that. But is it the toughest election? Without a doubt.
Why?
So again, because so much has changed, so much is uncertain. I mean, the very fact that just a few months ago I actually lost an election by a fairly large margin against what was clearly sort of a misplaced vote based on sentiment. You can't help but ask yourself, is that going to happen this time as well? Then, of course, you have the whole way in which the BJP is approaching this election, hardly contesting any seats in the valley themselves, but propping up any number of forces to try and divide votes. I mean, it is so clear that the BJP's sort of strategy in this election is to try to consolidate Jammu votes on religious lines and divide Kashmir votes based on sentiment and a whole host of other factors.
Are you talking about the engineer Rashid factor?
Not just him. He's just one pawn in this whole thing. Delhi has tried so many other ways of...
Why do you call him a pawn?
What other way would you describe him? What other way is there to describe somebody who comes out of jail for 20 days, where everybody else in that case is still languishing in prison? I can understand in the way in which Arvind Kejriwal came out, that was a case against him alone. In the FIR that has been filed and the charge sheet that has been filed in the matter in which engineer Rashid is arrested, 4 other people are named: Yasin Malik, Shabir Shah, Asia Andrabi, and Masrat Alam. How come they're not out?
Rashid isn't accused, though, as far as I know, of killing someone. The others
No,
are.
I'm talking about this charge sheet.
Yeah.
That charge sheet is different.
Yes.
But in this particular charge sheet, in which
this is about terror funding.
They are also named in that particular one. I'm not talking about the other case. But in this case, how is it they're not being considered? There are so many other people, I mean, who have been arrested under the UAPA, who don't even get a date in court, much less bail. And we know so many high-profile cases of that nature. The people who sort of in their misplaced enthusiasm set off smoke grenades in parliament and then did some sloganeering, they are struggling to get their bail heard under UAPA. This guy, somehow the NIA quite happily sort of waters down its objections and he walks out.
Let's assume for a moment that what you're saying is correct and this is a very planned release, both for the Lok Sabha and now. People still have to vote for him. People still have to believe in the story that engineer Rashid represents. Now, for years, he's been an independent MLA. He used to, it's amazing that everybody's forgotten this, but he used to organize beef parties. You will, of course, remember that.
I was in the assembly when my members saved him from being beaten up.
Yeah.
I remember when, they literally wanted to lynch him in the assembly. And my MLA at that time from Home Shalibug and Pahalgam stood in front and protected him.
How do you ideologically, if he is a BJP proxy as you allege, how do you ideologically understand this moment? Has nobody
Because
reminded the BJP about Rashid's Deep
at this
Party?
point in time, I believe the BJP will give free rein to anybody to say whatever they like, so long as the votes that are being cut belong to the National Conference Congress Alliance. You can pretty much say what you like.
Hmm. But even so, I ask you, people still have to vote for him, right? The BJP can put him out there, the NIA can release him. Ultimately, it's up to the voter who to vote for.
Sure.
So obviously, he's capturing something on the ground.
Well, we don't know whether he's
Or
capturing
he did
anything
in the Lok
at all.
Sabha. He did
in
in
the
the
Lok
Lok
Sabha
Sabha.
elections, he wasn't out.
Yeah.
So the symbolism of that election is very different from this one.
That was sympathy about him
That
being
was,
in jail.
look, his sons basically went out and said two things, both misleading. One, please vote for my father, otherwise he's going to be hanged. Now, the case in which he is arrested, the charges that have been framed against him do not include the death penalty as a punishment option. So that was an outright lie. The second thing they said was, vote for my father, we have to get him out of jail. That was a lie as well, because you do not come out of jail on the basis of votes. If you did, Arvind Kejriwal, Manish Sisodia, Hemant Soren, and so on and so forth, would never have been detained. So that was purely a campaign based on sympathy to tug at people's heartstrings and win votes.
And now that he's out on bail?
Now that he's out, look, the results will show. But so far at least, the response that he has got, whether in Baramulla on the first day that he came out of jail, whether in South Kashmir in the public meetings that he's had, has been far below what any of us would have expected. The fact that he's had to go and reach out to the Jamaat to tie up. Now, his politics and the Jamaat's politics are poles apart. This is clearly like a marriage of convenience, because he's not getting the response he expected.
You know, I met some supporters, in fact, some candidates from his party, and they argued that perhaps there could be a hung assembly situation. They rejected, of course, the allegations that they linked to the BJP. And I said, would you support the BJP in that scenario? And they said, well, there could be a few good people in the wrong party. Are you concerned that maybe there could be a hung assembly with a Jammu chief minister? Is that the plan that you think you have to counter on the ground? Is that the BJP's political master plan?
Clearly that's the BJP's plan, because they've said as much. This is no secret. The Home Minister of India, while releasing the manifesto of the BJP, says that other than 2 or 3 parties, if we run short of the numbers, we will make them up with the rest of the people. The rest of the people include Sajad Lone of the People's Conference, Altaf Bukhari of Apni Party, Ghulam Nabi Azad of DPAP, Engineer Rashid of AIP, and all the other assorted independents that are floating around here. When the Home Minister of India owns them and says that should we fall short of the numbers, these are where we'll make up the numbers from. What does that tell you?
You're saying the Home Minister of India owns these people you've just named?
He said as much. He didn't name these entities. These are not my words.
He didn't name these entities.
No, but what he did do was name the ones he wouldn't tie up with,
which are National Conference and
Congress, and then he alluded to the PDP. Now, the PDP I don't trust, because in 2014, they went out and asked for votes against the BJP, and then went and tied up with the BJP straight away. So nobody's going to forgive and forget that so quickly. But the ones he did not name, which obviously means that they're the ones he will tie up with tomorrow, other parties I listed for you.
Yeah. Now, the question, of course, is why couldn't all of you in the Valley, all of whom bore the brunt of a policy that you disagreed with, which was the abrogation of 370, all of you were detained in varying degrees. Why couldn't your alliance, the Gupkar alliance, we're here on Gupkar Road talking to you right now, why couldn't that stay?
Well, first and foremost, it was never an electoral alliance.
But why not?
It wasn't. It was more about the idea of protecting or trying to bring back what was taken away from us. But that said, the relentless political attacks that we started facing from the PDP, even before the parliament elections, made working together very uncomfortable. They went back to form almost immediately after Wahid Farah came out of jail, and once the political activities started again, the songs that they played at their sort of raising day functions, the speeches that they made, the social media campaign that was sort of instigated by the PDP president's sort of daughter and others, were almost singularly focused against the National Conference. But even then, when we were sitting down to discuss our seat sharing arrangement for the parliament elections, Given that in 5 seats it's very difficult to accommodate 3 parties, at that time, speaking to Salman Khurshid Saab, and he will bear witness to this, I had told him in no uncertain terms that look, as long as the PDP supports the India bloc and our 5 candidates in this parliament election, I am more than happy to keep a door open. The National Conference will be happy to sit down and work out a tripartite seat sharing understanding that will include the Congress, National Conference, PDP, and obviously a seat for Tariq Ami Saab.
So you were ready to have a seat adjustment?
Absolutely. For the assembly election. With the PDP, for the assembly election.
And what happens then?
The PDP filed 3 candidates in the valley against us and did nothing to support the Congress in Jammu. And then once the parliament election results were out, started their national conference bashing all over again.
So what does that tell you? Do you believe at this point that if push came to shove, the PDP, Mehbooba Mufti's party, could join hands with the BJP again?
Look, I don't trust what they say.
They say that about you also.
Well, that's fine, because I'm not the one who took the BJP into power in 2014, am I?
But you have also been in alliance with them previously, with a different BJP and a different BJP leader.
But the very sort of clear difference is that the National Conference and the BJP or the NDA were allied at the central government level. We didn't bring the BJP into Jammu and Kashmir. The PDP did the exact opposite. They allied in J&K. They brought the BJP into Jammu and Kashmir and had no sort of power sharing understanding in Delhi. Now, what was worse?
Now, listening to you, one gets the sense that you believe that the entire sort of political establishment, either directly or indirectly, has one aim to somehow keep the National Conference out of power.
Not indirectly, directly.
Everybody in on it together?
Other than the Congress, minus one candidate who, again, sort of went a little berserk.
That's Banihal?
Yeah. Other than that, can you point out a single party whose overwhelming attack isn't against the National Conference? Because I can't think of even one. Starting from the BJP, working my way down to most of these independents. I'm not the one who put Engineer Rashid in jail. Yet he spends most of his speech talking about the National Conference and not about the BJP. The sort of the inherent contradictions that come out of Engineer Rashid's campaign are mind-boggling. The fact that you talked about his candidates. How is it that a man who talks about being opposed to Prime Minister Modi's Naya Kashmir Nara then gives tickets to those people who for the last 5 years have done nothing but sell Naya Kashmir to the people of Jammu and Kashmir? How is it that Engineer Rashid talks about respecting the Hurriyat Conference and the sacrifices of those leaders, etc., etc., talks about Yasin Malik and how he's opposed to him being executed, and then then sort of hugs an individual who goes out and pulls down the board of the Hurriyat Conference from their office in Rajbagh, who publicly calls the media and demands Yasin Malik's execution. Now, somewhere there is a contradiction between what Engineer Rashid tells people and what he does.
Now, Omar, we've all been around long enough, we're old enough to know that, as the cliche goes, politics makes for strange bedfellows. So, the National Conference and the BJP were not predictable allies. Mehbooba Mufti and the BJP were not predictable allies. So, I have to ask you, do you ever see yourself, if it came to a matter of political survival, tying up with the BJP
Actually,
again?
Tying up with the BJP would be the exact opposite of political survival. Today, Mehbooba Mufti is actually struggling for political survival because of 2014. Today, her daughter runs a serious risk of losing her first election because of 2014. So tying up with the BJP for the National Conference, and for me, would be the exact opposite of what you're saying. It wouldn't be political survival. It would be the death of our politics and my political career.
Is your difference with Modi's BJP or is it with the BJP?
At this point in time, how do you separate the two?
Well, nothing is constant in politics.
True, but I haven't seen anything in the BJP that would suggest to me that there is any scope for a sort of Vajpayee-type leader to emerge. I mean, Vajpayee was the person who coined the Insaniyat Jamhuriyat Kashmiriyat phrase. Yeah. He went to the LOC and talked about you can have permanent neighbors, but not permanent friends.
Yeah.
Who started the bus to Muzaffarabad, who went to Minar-e-Pakistan. This government has done the exact opposite of all those things.
I mean, they would say they tried in their early years.
What did they try with the bus? They just stopped it.
No, not the bus, but he went.
Exactly.
Mr. Modi went for Nawaz Sharif's birthday. He called them for the swearing in.
No, fair enough. I'm talking about the other stuff that happened with us. Prime Minister Vajpayee put on the back burner the whole 370 matter and so on and so forth. So, I mean, I don't know how events will shape up in the future, but there is no separation between Prime Minister Modi and the BJP.
Rahul Gandhi met you and presumably discussed the alliance. You've said except for one seat, it's going pretty smoothly. But is the Congress bringing some value politically to the game?
Well, I mean,
you can't say no, I guess.
Well, no.
But seriously, how is the alliance? Like, do you wish
actually on the ground, other than the seats where, I mean, the ones where we called a so-called friendly fight, and you talked about the one that's anything but friendly. But generally, I mean, we're working all right. We are hoping that once the campaign for the third phase picks up, because that's where we really need the Congress to step up and sort of start delivering seats, and that's in Jammu. The handful of seats they're fighting in the valley, we'll manage one way or the other. But I am looking forward to people like Rahul, Priyanka, and others coming to Jammu and taking the fight to the BJP, because at the moment things have been a little quiet on the Congress front in Jammu.
Yeah, it seems a bit muted.
At the moment, yeah. But then,
why do you think that is?
I think it seems to be in their DNA. They work late. Unlike sort of us, I'm up at 6, I start my work at 6 o'clock in the morning, and really after 10:30, I don't want to know what's happening. I'll wait till the next morning. The Congress only seems to start working at 10 o'clock at night. They would much rather have meetings at 3 o'clock in the morning and decide seat sharing arrangements at 5 o'clock in the morning.
Is that what happened? Is that the time at which...
Actually, a lot of that did happen. I mean, not quite 5 o'clock in the morning, but the meetings went on until the early hours. So I can imagine that their campaign also will pick up towards the latter part of the third phase. Just so long as it picks up, that'll be good.
You don't betray a lot of emotion necessarily in your public demeanor, unlike, let's say, your father, who's often been a more flamboyant politician. I'm building up to ask you.
Gandarbal.
Yes.
Yeah.
The topi, the turban, the izzat, the honor, asking people to uphold that. It was a very emotional speech, but it also made you vulnerable to, taunts from your political opponents. Tell us the story or the emotion behind it. What was the emotion?
It just felt that, at the end of the day, you're asking people to vote. Why should people think that you're doing it from a position of sort of like, it's my right to get your vote? And particularly in Gandarbal. Maybe if it had been another seat, I wouldn't have. But Gandarbal is the area that traditionally my family have fought and represented, whether in parliament or in the assembly. And I don't know, perhaps it just came from the realization that I don't want people to think that I consider votes in Gandarbal as my birthright, and that somehow I'm lording it over people, and that they have no option but to vote me into the assembly.
But you were conveying vulnerability. Do you feel vulnerable? Or is every election a kind of...
Look, I make the point, I've just come off the back of a pretty nasty loss.
Sure.
So, I guess there is an element of vulnerability as well. But more importantly than that, in an election, the people are the masters. What is wrong in bowing down and accepting that? It is their votes that decide our future. And the sooner we acknowledge that as candidates, perhaps the better we will be in terms of reaching out to them.
So you don't regret that speech?
No, absolutely not. And I think those are my opponents who sort of...
they said he was going begging for votes.
Well, I'm glad I went begging for votes, because unlike them, I don't think I'm some sort of Maharaja that is here to rule sort of until the end of time. I'm glad I begged for votes, and I would beg for votes again. Because again, I make the point, the voters are the masters. We are there, we get the opportunity to serve them. And why not accept that?
You said that once you commit to something, you put everything of yourself. So you went from being skeptical about contesting, and now that you're in it, you're contesting from 2 seats. Is your ambition to be chief minister again, even though this is not the assembly that you would have wanted?
I have no such ambitions. I don't
Why
know.
not?
I don't. I mean, I've been chief minister of Jammu and Kashmir prior to 5th August 2019.
Yes. In a more empowered assembly.
This is a very different assembly. So, look, it is not my ambition. That said, I don't know what my destiny has in store for me. I don't even know what 8th of October has in store for us.
But what would you choose for yourself if you could choose?
I would choose to turn back the clock to prior 5th August 2019, write off all this nonsense that we've had to go through and start from there. But I don't get to choose that.
And now that the last door, in a way, at the Supreme Court has been knocked on, with
well,
not...
therein lies sort of a difference in point of view.
Okay.
How is this the last door?
I mean, you can file for a review.
Or subsequently, a government in Delhi comes in that is more willing to sit down and talk to you about this. At the end of the day, what this Supreme Court did was overturn 3 past judgments of the Supreme Court that found in favor of 370. Is it really beyond the realm of possibility that a subsequent bench of the Supreme Court will overturn this one?
See, any subsequent government has to create a political acceptability around it. And like I said, one of the things the BJP has managed to do is to create a widespread thumbs up. That was a good thing. Why should any state have special status? I know all the contradictions, but
I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
Then what about all the states that do have special status right now? I think it's about time that we started a campaign to remove special status from any states. Why did you stop at 370? Let's move to 371.
Yeah.
I absolutely, I have no problem if what the BJP says is that we have to bring every part of this country on a level playing field. And that's why you have one nation, one election, the secular civil code or whatever they called it. Fine. Even within erstwhile Jammu and Kashmir, you have created 2 different dispensations. The domicile laws, job laws, land laws in Ladakh are a lot stronger than the ones you have here right now. So where is this whole one nation, one system sort of thing? It's only Jammu and Kashmir that has been on the receiving end. And this is something we'll keep talking about.
Let me ask you in the end, my mind goes back to 2002. That was perhaps the first big political knock, in a sense, for you. And at that time, it was Sajjad Lone, a separatist, then flirting and being encouraged to flirt with mainstream politics. Today, he's a mainstream politician, and there are others who are putting their toes in the water. When you think back to that time and this time, which one feels tougher?
Well, I think this time is probably a little tougher because there are many more of those dipping their toes in the water.
New variables.
Very many of them. There's a whole host of sort of different permutations and combinations that are sought to be worked out. Sajjad Lone, even at that time, his influence was limited to a handful of constituencies in North Kashmir. Even though he tried to grow, eventually that's where his political space has pretty much shrunk back to. It's quite possible we'll see the same out of these new permutations and combinations. But at the moment, they're untested. So who knows how this will play out?
Have you ever thought of doing something other than politics, or is this the rest of your life?
I'm too old to start something new now. But no, this is what I do. This is a fight that we can't give up on.
In 2014, as you said, when we met, you're talking about the next election, and the next election didn't happen, and we're a decade on. If I were to ask you where you think you might be 5 years from now,
I wouldn't answer that question. I have learned that you answer that question at your own peril. Like I said, when we last sat down like this, I literally thought that I'd be 50, 51 when the next election comes around. We'll see what happens. Here I am, a decade later, and we're only now sort of preparing for polling tomorrow. So I've long sort of given up that crystal ball gazing.
And so, how do you keep going? I mean, do you get a sense of humor? Do you become just more cynical?
You become you well at times you become cynical, at times you sort of try to look at the brighter side of things. I've actually, fortunately, I'm not given to sort of wallowing in self pity and sort of thinking about what was or what should have been. I'm in that respect very matter of fact. Once I know what the circumstances are and how things are, I orient my mindset to factor that in, and that's how it is.
Well, we wish you well. And this is going to be an interesting election.
It is in many ways.
And I hope we get a chance to speak. Speaking to you after a long time, I hope we can speak again after the results are in.
8th of October, and then we'll see.
Absolutely. Thank you, Omar.
Pleasure.